Stopping advanced threats requires knowing exactly what you're up against. ExtraHop Reveal X is the only solution that shows you not just where intruders are going, but where they've been. 90-day look-back and complete network visibility across the data center, cloud, and device edge helps security teams respond 84% faster with ExtraHop Reveal X network detection and response. Explore the interactive demo at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque. If you missed Security Weekly Unlocked, you can now access all of the content on demand, whether you registered before the live event or not, by visiting securityweekly.com/unlocked and clicking either the button to register or the button to log in. We're going to leave that up until the end of March, and then we're going to, I think, move it to our YouTube channel, but we'll figure out a place to put it afterwards. Our next live webcast will be on March 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, where you will learn how to prepare Linux hosts for unexpected threats. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to register now. If you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts or technical trainings, they are available for your viewing pleasure at securityweekly.com/on-demand. The articles are going to relate to our previous segment around security incidents. I pulled out a number of articles, Jason, that kind of relate to the topic, the conversation we just had with David. I'm going to start with the cyber insurance one, because we went down the cyber insurance rat hole a little bit, and I did that on purpose because I wanted to bring up aspects of the cyber insurance policies. New York came out on February 4th and issued a new framework, a risk framework for cyber insurers, because the cyber insurers are paying out a little more than I think certain places would like them to pay out, and it's starting to impact the insurance industry.
Yeah, who would have thought? I mean, obviously, over the last year, I think I've engaged personally as a technology services organization with cyber liability insurance organizations more than I ever have in the past. So that tells me, and in the majority of those times were ransomware attacks, right? So, that means more organizations are, kicking in their cyber liability insurance, getting those fiduciaries assigned, and then going through the incident response process, which in turn means, payout from the insurance organization. So, it's definitely something that I've seen coming down the pipeline. I've been having conversations with insurance brokers and insurance agencies where, they're basically saying, listen, how can we be better at assessing risk of our customers so we know what type of liability we're taking on?
Yeah.
So those insurance brokers and agencies are actually looking at it and saying, hey, we can be doing things better.
And I like it as helping you with some of the costs that you would incur during a breach.
Yeah.
Not all of them, right? I think we have to be careful which costs that we, are assigning to the insurance company. I don't think, for example, they should be allowed by law, and this may be controversial, but I don't think they should be allowed to cover your payment to the ransom, because I think that's funding enemy nation states and funding terrorists and other cyber criminals.
That actually gets brought up in this article, right? About how they're saying you should not pay ransom, right? They're recommending that you don't. And I mean, you guys know me, right? Come from the military. You don't negotiate with terrorists. I have that same type of philosophy. You don't negotiate with terrorists. The problem that we're finding is that you're going to get into situations, and I've heard it directly from CFOs, where they say, we're going to use any tool available to us to get our business up and running as quickly as we possibly can. And if paying the ransom is the least amount of money we're going to have to pay to get our business up and running, we'll do it. So there needs to be some level of legal angle there to say, no, you're not going to hit the easy button. No, you're not going to pay the ransom. And no, you're not going to perpetuate these ransomware attacks.
Yeah, I mean, we covered the article when Treasury came out and basically said, look, you don't pay these ransoms. New York Department of Financial Services basically came out, reiterated, do not pay the ransom, and then laid out a framework to say, look, you insurers need to manage your risk of your policies, the companies you're insuring, and these different policies, whether known or unknown, because you potentially could put yourself into a liquidity issue if you continue to pay out some of these cyber insurance claims. So it was interesting, like the first 4 out of 7 is all around risk management, which is what an insurer should be doing anyways, because they are the ultimate risk managers, right? But there was a couple other ones that got interesting towards the end, right? Educate insured and insurance producers, right? So that puts a burden on the brokers and stuff to do some education. Get cybersecurity expertise. Well, what does that mean?
Hey, wow, who'd have thought?
Wow, who'd have thunk it?
Between us three here, and probably every single one of our listeners, that's table stakes. But hey, we got to line it up and actually show people this is what you have to do, right?
And the last one was required notice to law enforcement, right? Which could be FBI, it could be local authorities, but it's going to force a notification to law enforcement, which triggers some very interesting things depending on who the organization is.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Once you open the door to law enforcement, game on, right?
Yep, exactly.
A lot of companies don't want to do that because they're like, wait, what else are they going to find?
That's one thing. Now you're open to e-discovery. Now you're open to e-discovery. We talked about it in the last segment, right? So it's one of those laws of unintended consequences. You've just opened up the door to e-discovery, and now you could be liable for some things.
Right, exactly right. And you don't know how far that scope goes once you open that door, right?
Absolutely.
And if you're in a highly regulated area,
yes,
think about that. There's no more hiding this kind of stuff under the covers to try to stay away from the regulators.
No. But at the end of the day, I agree with where we're going as far as New York State law and what they're doing. Number one, again, to help mitigate paying out those ransoms, because that's not something that I believe is a good strategy. Sounds like Paul agrees with me, right? But also to really make the insurance companies step up and do something about making sure that their client base has a good, strong security posture and maturity. And if not, give them the ability to help mature those organizations, right? Because again, it shouldn't be a situation where the insurance agencies say, no, we're not going to insure you. It's more of a, here are the things we need you to start doing, and we need some type of a remediation schedule to get you on board to where you need to be, right? So they should be leaving their clients better than they found them and giving them a path.
Yeah, I know AIG has some programs for their insurers. I know Zurich and Marsh & McLellan are pretty mature in their programs.
Yes.
So, I mean, look, I think some of the insurers are doing the right things. I think there's a whole lot of other insurers that may not be at that same level.
Agreed.
But to your point, giving organizations the ability to get the resources and help they need to better mature themselves as part of these policies, I think would be a great thing.
Yeah. And again, having on the roles of a cyber liability insurance incident response program, having a ransomware negotiator on those roles should not, that lever is something we should never be pulling.
Yeah. Interesting. I switched it up a little bit. We're going to go back to security incidents and business continuity because some of the later articles, but I pulled this article on financial targets and motivation for employees. And I thought this was interesting because when you think about how we build comp plans, MBOs, we think a lot about the financial impact, and financial results are an outcome, not a root driver for employee performance. And I thought it was very interesting because, in our business, we're pretty open about our financials and kind of tracking. And some of the comp plans obviously have financial metrics to them, but what they're saying is, look, this cannot be part of every employee's because it just basically, it's not a motivator. It actually turns your employees off.
Yeah, 100%. Again, it's know your audience, right? As a leader, you're trying to motivate your teams, right, to meet certain outcomes. So all of those incentive programs that you build should be building toward the outcome you're looking to achieve. And always talking about finances is not the outcome, right? That's a company outcome. That's a conversation I'm having with my CEO. That's a conversation that I'm having with my peers, with the board of directors. And in some instances, right, very targeted and meaningful with the team, but that's not the everyday conversation. It can't be the everyday conversation because ultimately your team's going to think that all you're motivated about is the mighty dollar.
Yeah,
you want to be the why.
You want a growth plan. You don't want short-term goals to be rewarded with just monetary compensation.
Exactly.
Because it has to be a career in growth planning, right? That employees are going to meet goals and be happy and be rewarded and feel like they have a purpose is more important. And that, there's a career path more so than, short-term goals for monetary compensation. I've experienced
100%.
Don't work.
100% agreed.
Agreed. Next article, After the Breach and Beyond. A really close tie to the last segment. I brought this in because I think he brings up some very interesting points here on aspects of the response after the breach and beyond. We talked a lot about preparedness in the last segment. And so this kind of just another source, I think, for people to really take a look at to say, how do I prepare for the breach and what are the things I have to do pre, during, and post breach? And so this was interesting.
Yeah, article. No, I mean, I thought the article, the beginning of the article was great, right? And as I started going through deeper down into the article, I think it kind of took a left turn eventually, right? Once it started talking about like NIST 861 and incident handling guide, like I get that. That's something, we live NIST every day where I work. And at the end of the day, the things that were outlined, like efforts following in the areas of reputation repair and restoration and risk management program and awareness and training. If you look at NIST 861, those aren't even the top items that come into play. With that framework, they're really talking about from the beginning, how do you build an effective program, right? And what all of those components, kind of like what we talked about in the last segment. Here are all the things you need to do to build a mature incident response program. So it kind of took a left turn toward the middle-ish end, but that beginning of the article was pretty good.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good too. Texas power outage flags need to revisit business continuity. This is for Slack himself. Look, we know what Texas went through.
Yeah.
But it also impacted a whole bunch of people outside the state of Texas.
Absolutely.
And because they had their data centers in Texas. State Farm had a huge outage. California Medical, because their IBM data center was in Texas.
Yeah.
And have we forgotten about business continuity and disaster recovery?
I don't. So this is a very touchy subject for me, right? Because at the end of the day, so we have a data center in Dallas as well, right? And we didn't skip a beat at the end of the day because we prepared for it. We literally spun up an incident command team based on IT, security, operational folks, and our client services side of the aisle to continuously monitor whether or not there was a blip in our data center in Dallas, right? To make sure that our high availability was going to kick into play and we were going to be resilient. But that's a resilience team. That's a resilience team that's made up of security, IT, these operational teams, right? So we have this business resilience planning. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you, right? If I, as a leader, did not grab that bull by the horns and say, I'm managing our business continuity for the organization holistically, it would have been, a siloed activity. So ultimately, you need to have someone driving the success of BCDR within your organization to make sure it's successful. And I think in part it's a shared responsibility. Security leaders need to have a play in there. IT leaders need to have play in there, and then your business units need to have play in there as well, right? So yeah, I mean, it definitely caught folks who were not prepared off guard.
Because it's hard to deal with that low probability, high impact event. And that's what Texas, one of the things it showed us is that it's never like 0% risk. You could always have, again, it's that low probability. They're like, the chances of that happening and high impact, we as humans don't like to believe that something that bad is going to happen. Therefore, Jason, to your point, we may not put any resources behind it unless someone like Jason or other champions in your organization go, yeah, I understand it's low probability and high impact, but we still need a plan because if it does happen, our answer can't be, we're just totally screwed, which was unfortunately, a lot of people's homes and infrastructure in Texas.
Yeah, yeah. And ultimately, I took the mentality of if the stuff were to hit the fan, I'm going to have to be engaged anyway.
Yep.
And let me tell you, I want to make it as painless as possible.
Right.
So if nobody's owning this, I'm going to freaking own it. And I'm going to make sure it's getting done correctly. Because again, we talk about on the show all the time, leadership isn't necessarily a title. Just take a leadership role and get it done. If nobody's doing it and it's a gap, be that person who can be the catalyst for getting it done.
Yeah, and security has to be at the table because your backup can't be, our SSH communications went down, so we're just going to fall back to Telnet. It'll be totally fine, right?
Like, exactly.
Security still has to exist.
You got it. Yeah. So there's going to be an adverse effect on the security team no matter what. So if nobody's owning it and it's not up to date and it's not modernized and it's not being tested, take the bull by the horns. It will show that you're taking a leadership role in the organization and elevate your position in the organization. I can guarantee it.
Yeah, and I think the challenge for most CISOs, this was one of many things that potentially falls on their plate. Yeah. And it may not be the highest priority at the moment because you're dealing with, a breach or you're dealing with, shift to remote work and all this other stuff. And it's like you almost kind of forget about it in the back of your mind.
Right.
I mean, one of my first projects, and I think I've told the story before, when I left the nuclear world, I went to oil and gas. And my first task when I went down there was build the business continuity disaster recovery plan in case a hurricane came up the Gulf and hit New Orleans, which is where their big refinery was.
Yep.
That was my first task. And I remember, all the planning that went into thinking about that. To Paul's point, low probability, high impact. But Katrina hit like 7-8 years later, and they had to execute that plan. But if you didn't prepare for it, there was no way you were going to be able to recover from that event quickly.
Absolutely. And think about the benefit of just that preparation, right? That preparation over time that was done, the huge benefit it had at the end of the day. And again, I say this, that it's a shared responsibility across the organization, but somebody needs to quarterback the initiative. If it's not being done by anyone. So why not security folks, risk folks, right? At least quarterback the conversation. And then from there, maybe someone else gets designated, an operational leader or an IT leader or whatever the case may be. But at least go into it knowing you're doing your due diligence to raise a risk, because it's part of a risk profile of an organization, right? Your job as a CISO is to identify some risk. Well, guess what? If your BCDR plan sucks, that's a risk.
Yep. And if your security incident program sucks, that's a risk. And if your security training and awareness program sucks, that's a risk. So this next article talks about undervalued, ineffective, why security programs still fall short. But yet I read this thing, it's all the things we know, and you get down to solutions for success, and it's like, really, that's it? I mean, we turn it into short burst video games and problem solved.
Yeah.
I didn't see the solution fully come out in this article.
Yeah, nah, boo. That's all I can say. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know. It definitely wasn't something that I got a lot of value out of. I'll put it that way. Because
a lot of problem discussion, which we all know.
Sure.
But then I get down to the solution for success area, and it's
gamification.
It's like, make a game out of it, make it fun for employees, and that'll fix everyone's problem.
Yeah, not at all.
The goal is to raise awareness. Yep. How do you keep basically raising awareness?
That's it, right?
That will have an impact in a positive manner if there is a heightened state of awareness and you maintain that heightened state of awareness. That essentially what it comes down to, making employees realize that in all communications, someone could be lying to you.
Yes.
And constantly keeping that awareness up is the goal. And I mean,
I couldn't agree more, help. Right? And in some of the places where I see the most impact, because you want to know what? Doing trainings in an LMS and taking a quiz later failed. It's failed over the last 10 years. Doesn't work, right? Checks in the box, failure. What I've seen works the best is honestly taking very, very quick communications, whether it's video, email communications, messages through like Teams or Slack or whatever the case may be, and making it very meaningful to the end user, meaning personal life. I found the best success when I've equated things to folks' personal lives that they can transition into the business and they remember them. They remember them. I've received emails from folks on our finance team, clerks on the finance team saying, hey, I took this communication, I brought it back to my parents because they were being scammed, right? And I used your email to show them where, the scam was happening and to teach them about these types of scams that are happening. That's a win. That's a win for me because they're taking it in their personal lives. They're using it, which will easily transition into the business world.
Yeah, agreed. Oh, anyways. Oh, last article. One more. We're doing. Yeah, we're going through. We know that there's a skills gap shortage. We're out interviewing people. I thought this was a really good article. Like, how do you do background checks? Paul was talking about a little bit before, right? Like, people are going to lie to you somewhere along the way, right? And so we think about, okay, well, how do I validate the trustworthiness of the candidates I'm looking at? What can you and can't you do when it comes to background checks? And so I thought this was a good article because it lays out some of the things you can't do, right? You can't ask about lifestyle, age, marital status, disabilities, religion, blah, blah, blah. Those are all off the table. But it does give
unless you're the federal government. Point of clarification. Different story.
Right.
That's true. You can't do it, but Uncle Sam can do it, and maybe be able to put it on a census or not a census. I'm not quite sure where the current state of that is.
I've heard this from folks that have worked for 3-letter government agencies that they, at least in the past, I'm not sure how it works today, do ask about your political affiliations and things of that nature.
Interesting.
But as an employer, non-government employer, basically you're verifying that what the person has told you in the application process is true. Like, did you actually work there? Did you actually get that degree? Right? That's really the goal of the background check, right?
Yeah.
Is to make sure the person's not lying to you.
Yes. Yeah, that's it, right? And to be honest with you, this is an instance when I sit down and I partner with my HR team heavily. Right. Because from a human resources perspective, I want to know what I can do, what I can't do, what I can ask, what I can't ask to make sure that we're above bar. Right. At the end of the day. And we have certain processes that we follow depending. Right. So for U.S. domestic folks, we have certain background checks we can do. For international folks, we have a little bit different process, a little bit different. But now you're dealing with, international type court records that you can pull, right? So similar, but a little bit different depending on domestic versus overseas.
Yeah, and I thought the guidelines here. Look, you can do reference checks at I think pretty much anywhere, and you should do reference checks, right? Check references. Good check. Identity confirmation. You're going to have to do an I-4 at least in the U.S. And so you're going to have to do some level of identity confirmation as part of employment, right?
Yep.
It's the court records and some of the other database checks that I'm like, I don't know where you can and can't do those.
Could vary by state,
It could vary, yeah.
True.
That gets tricky if the business and the employee are in different states. So I would say check with your attorneys and state regulations to make sure you are in compliance. And if you're hiring hackers, the fact that they have a court record, that could be a thing.
Right.
And it bothers some people, which I think is a shame, but it shouldn't.
Yeah. I'm going to be 100% candid here and say that I glean more information out of an interview than I do out of any of these background checks, unless something's a huge red flag, obviously, right? That's bar none obvious, but I'll glean more out of an interview because we're looking for attitude and aptitude and depending on the questions you ask, you can pull out things like integrity and whether or not they're lying about their education record or anything like that. So, I think that live conversation is a very key piece to this as well.
Yeah, agree. But there's some organizations are going to want to do certain checks, and so good checklist if you need to do some background checks on your candidates. You might do them for your employees. I don't know. I think Paul and I think you and I did go through one actually.
Yeah, I will. In acquisitions, yes, you will have to do that stuff. I think that's pretty standard.
Yeah. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you everyone for watching and listening, and we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.